This afternoon we have 4 presentations. I'm standing to the side because everybody else will be asking if they can be heard, but I think I have to ask, can you see me? So I'm hoping that you can see me. My name is Sudi Sharifi, and I will be chairing this afternoon session. And I will leave the introduction of our perfect presenters to themselves, so I won't take much time, and I would like to introduce our first presenter, Professor Refat Al-Faouri, who will be presenting on leveraging learning in Arab region. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mrs. Chairman. في البداية اسمحوا لي أني أشكر إخواننا في هيئة الهوية في الإمارات العربية على تنظيمهم هذا الحدث. كما نبارك لدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة بعيدها 43 إن شاء الله عمر مديد، ونتمنى لهم إن شاء الله مزيدا من الرفاه والتقدم. My name is Professor Refat Al-Faouri. I am the Director General of Arab Administrative Development Organization, which is one of the organizations affiliated with the Arab League. I used to be the Vice President of one of the Jordanian university called Yarmouk University. My background in finance and business, and today my presentation is going to be 2 parts. First of all, we would like to draw or just review a quick picture about the education on the Arab world. At the same time, we're going to have a short glance about my organization, ARADO, the Arab Administrative Development Organization, as an e-learning organization, if it has to be. Please allow me to speak in Arabic. I would love to speak in both languages, but I will stick with the Arabic language for my short presentation. التعليم في الوطن العربي، التعليم والتعلم. الحقيقة المراجع لديموغرافية سكان الوطن العربي يلاحظ أكثر من ملاحظة. الملاحظة الأولى، قبل أن نتكلم عن التعليم والتعلم النوعي، هنالك بعض الإحصائيات عن الوطن العربي. الحقيقة لا أستطيع أن أقول أكثر من أنها إحصائيات مزعجة. لما نطلع على سكان الوطن العربي نجد أن ثلث الدول العربية نسبة الأمية فيها قد تصل إلى 50%، وهذا أمر محزن جدا. فعندما نتكلم عن الموارد البشرية وتنمية الموارد البشرية أو عن مؤسسات المتعلمة، قبل ذلك نقول نحن نتكلم عن ما يسمى بالسوبر ستراكشر. فهل لدينا أندر ستراكشر؟ البنية التحتية اللي هي التعليم الأساسي في بعض الدول العربية مختل، وأتمنى عليكم أن لا تعتقدوا أنني متشائما، لا، هنالك فوارق بين الدول العربية في كل المؤشرات اللي نتحدث فيها، ولكن نحن نتكلم عن الوطن العربي بشكل عام. فلا يعقل أن نتكلم عن مؤسسات متعلمة، عن حكومات ذكية، عن تعليم خلاق ومبدع، وعن مؤسسات تعمل كحاضنات للإبداع، ونسبة الأمية تصل إلى 40 و50%. لذلك في بعض هذه الدول الأولويات مختلة. طبعا كنا بنعرف أنه هذه الدول اختلت في هذه المنظومة لأسباب يعني يطول شرحها، ولكن السبب الرئيسي هو عدم الاستقرار السياسي، فأولوياتهم مختلفة. ما معقول أن نذهب للحكومة الذكية والإلكترونية ونحن نفتقر إلى الماء والغذاء والمأوى. لما بنيجي للتعليم تحديدا في الوطن العربي نجد أيضا أن التعليم متراجع، وهذا ليس رأي شخصي، هذا ما وصلت وما آلت إليه القمة العربية الاقتصادية بالكويت قبل 3 سنوات. كل المجتمعين من الدول العربية والقادة خلصوا إلى هذه النتيجة التي لا تخفى على أحد، وأنا من الناس اللي أعتقد أو أؤكد هذه المعلومة كوني عملت في حقل التعليم مجال التعليم حوالي 20 عاما. نعم، للأسف أن التعليم نوعا متراجع، وإن كان كما متزايد، وبالتالي إحنا نتكلم عن نوعية تعليم. المطلوب، والدول المتقدمة تتكلم عن creative thinking وعن تعلم نوعي، والتعلم والتعليم في الوطن العربي في النوع يتراجع وإن كان في الكم يتزايد. هذا قادنا إلى ظاهرة أنا أسميتها بالأمية المقنعة. إحنا بنعرف إنه في عنا بطالة مقنعة بس مش أمية مقنعة، وهو أنه لما بنوظف أكثر من ناس في مكان، ولكن ظاهرة الأمية المقنعة وهو أن لدينا متعلمين يحملون درجات الأولى والثانية والثالثة الماجستير وأحيانا حتى الدكتوراه، وللأسف يفتقرون إلى الأساسيات في التعليم والقراءة، وهذه كارثة. وهذه نتجت عن نظرية أخرى سماها البعض بالأواني الفارغة، أي أن لدينا مؤسسات وفيها بنية تحتية كويسة وما شاء الله عليها، لدينا مؤسسات صحية وليس لدينا صحة، لدينا مؤسسات تعليمية ولكن لا يوجد لدينا تعليم بالمفهوم النوعي. إذن ليه إحنا بنحكي وبنركز على هذا الكلام؟ لأنه أنا شخصيا وكثير من الناس يعتقد أن ثراء الأمم في المدى المنظور القصير جدا مش الطويل سوف يكون ما يسمى بالintellectual capital. قضية أنه لدينا موارد طبيعية، بحار وأنهار وبترول وذهب وإلى آخره، هذه ما هي إلا تعطيك ميزة كي تخلق ما يسمى بالمجتمع المعرفة اللي تسوده القيمة المضافة والمعلومة المتقدمة، اللي بالأخير يأتينا ويكون عنا ما يسمى بالintellectual capital. والintellectual capital هو عبارة عن التقدم والتحديث والاختراع وبراعات الاختراع والريسيرش اند ديفلوبمنت بشكل عام. والآن هكذا تحسب ثراء الأمة، ونحن عم نشوف الآن كل الدول تتجه بهذا التوجه. ومش بس هيك، الدول الآن اللي تجلس في المقعد الأمامي في قطار الحضارة والمعرفة هي دول تفتقر للموارد الطبيعية وتفتقر لأشياء كثيرة، ولكنها لا تفتقر إلى الانتلكتشوال كابيتال. عشان هيك بنقول إنه قضية منظومة التعليم في الوطن العربي لازم نراجعها ولازم نشتغل عليها نوعا قبل كما. لذلك أيضا، وهذا ما أكد عليه حتى ديننا الحنيف، لأنه أول كما تحدث الأخوان اللي قبلي، أول آية نزلت على سيدنا محمد هي اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. هي كانت فيها رسالة كبيرة جدا، والواقع والترجمة إلى ذلك أنه لا نجد أي أمة ولا دولة في العالم وفي التاريخ تقدمت حضاريا إلا ضبطت منظومة التعليم. واللي عنده مثل غير هيك يذكرني. التعليم ومنظومة التعليم والتعليم النوعي هي اللي بتقود الأمة، وهي اللي المستقبل الأمم، وهي ثراء الأمم المستقبل. إحنا عندنا في تعليمنا للأسف أنه التعليم سواء كان الأساسي ولا التعليم الجامعي ما زال يقوم على الاسترجاع وعلى الحفظ، ويبتعد عن مهارات الاستقراء والاستنباط اللي بتؤدي إلى ما يسمى بالكريتيكال ثينكينج. ما بتقدر تنشئ إشي اسمه كريتيكال ثينكينج بدون ما تركز على مهارات الاستقراء والاستنباط deductive and inductive approach of thinking، مش قضية الحفظ والاسترجاع. وانتم عارفين انه قضية الحفظ والاسترجاع هي اللي بتتسيد منظومتنا التربوية والتعليمي في كثير من مدارسنا وجامعاتنا. لذلك أعتقد أنه نحتاج إلى وقفة ومراجعة، لأنه ما عاد الكم يفيد، بالعكس الكم يصبح عبء أحيان على كاهل الدولة في قضايا التوظيف. وعندما نأتي إلى قضايا التوظيف هنالك ظاهرة أيضا مرصودة في قضية التعليم والتعلم في الوطن العربي، أن هنالك توجه إلى الوظائف العامة، وظائف الدولة. إحنا لا ننتقص من الوظائف العامة وظائف الدولة، ولكن أنا أعتقد أن الأمر مختل عندما تكون الوظيفة العامة في الدولة تكون مغرية أكثر من القطاع الخاص. مش عيب ولا خطأ أن نتوظف في الوظائف العامة كما هي في الوظائف الخاصة، ولكن ما هو الخطير في ذلك؟ الخطير في ذلك أنه بنقتل روح المبادرة والإبداع والانتربرنور سبيريت عند الناس لما بنوجههم للوظائف العامة. وأنا في محفل مثل هذا المحفل المحترم سألت حقيقة وزراء العمل العرب، وزراء التربية والتعليم، وقلت: ماذا تريدوا من مجتمعاتكم؟ إحنا مجتمعاتنا هل نريد مجتمعات موظفين ولا مجتمعات رواد؟ إذا كنا نريد مجتمعات موظفين فنحن نسعى وراء تعليم نوعي معروف وكمي، وإذا أردنا المجتمع رواد فعلينا أن نغير في المنظومة التعليم شكلا ومضمونا، وبالتالي أيضا نوجه نحو روح المبادرة ونوح الإبداع حتى نخفف على كاهل الدول العربية، سيما أن الدول العربية أيضا في قضايا البطالة هي أعلى نسب في العالم. أعلى نسب في العالم في البطالة هي موجودة في الدول العربية. بجوز الوضع شوي أو مش شوي، كثير أحسن في دول مجلس التعاون، لكن بقية الدول العربية أقل نسبة بطالة هي 14% وتصل إلى 35 و40%، وهذا أمر غير مريح. ولا يمكن أن نخفف من هذه الظاهرة بالتعليم الكلاسيكي، ولا يمكن أن نخفف من هذه الظاهرة عن طريق خلق وظائف في المنظومة الحكومية اللي بتؤدي إلى زيادة في المصروفات العامة، وبالتالي ضغط على موازنة الدولة. هذه الصورة سامحوني لضيق الوقت حتى نقدر نغطي موضوعنا الصحيح. يعني هذه الصورة اللي مش مريحة لكم ولا لنا عن التعليم والتعلم في الوطن العربي، والحديث فيه يطول، ولكن هذا ملخص الصحيح لهذه الصورة. ننتقل للمنظمة العربية للتنمية الإدارية، وهي كما أسلفت إحدى منظمات العمل العربي المشترك 12 المنبثقة عن جامعة الدول العربية. وهذه المنظمة هي من أقدم منظمات الجامعة، أنشأت في عام 61، ومن ذلك الزمن حتى يومنا هذا بتنمو وترتقي بعملها وبمهامها وبأنشطتها، وهي من المنظمات القليلة والمحدودة، قد تكون منظمة أو منظمتين تعمل بالتمويل الذاتي، أي أنها لا تتلقى أي مساعدات مالية من الدول العربية، ولكن تعتمد على مصادرها الذاتية في تمويل نفسها. وهذا يعتبر أو كان ظاهرة تستحق الوقوف وتستحق المراجعة بين زميلات المنظمات الأخرى. فأنا كمدير لهذه المنظمة، وفي نهاية تقريبا عهدي في السنة الأخيرة من 8 سنوات، أقف وأسأل نفسي وأسأل زملائي وأقول: هل المنظمة العربية للتنمية الإدارية فعلا هي منظمة متعلمة؟ Is it a learning organization؟ ولا هي منظمة تقليدية زيها زي أي منظمة أخرى أو مؤسسة أخرى؟ أنا لما بدي أتكلم وأحدد ملامح المنظمة المتعلمة أو المنظمة العربية للتنمية الإدارية كمنظمة متعلمة، نحن ندعي أنها منظمة متعلمة، وإن شاء الله أنها تكون كذلك. أقول: إذا استطاعت أن تحقق نسب أو درجات من الرضا مرضية على 3 محاور، اللي هي خلق المعرفة creation of knowledge، ونقل المعرفة dissemination of knowledge، ونشر المعرفة transfer of knowledge. لأنه أنا بوجهة نظري وكثير من الباحثين، من إحدى المعالم الرئيسية للمؤسسة أو المنظمة المتعلمة هي خلق المعرفة ونقل المعرفة ونشر المعرفة. ففي مجال خلق المعرفة، ماذا فعلت التنمية الإدارية، المنظمة العربية للتنمية الإدارية في مجال خلق المعرفة؟ وأنا أتمنى أنه يعني لا أختزل تاريخ 53 عام من تاريخ المنظمة في عجالة أو في جملة أو في إيجاز، ولكن يعني هذه إشارات تعطينا فكرة بس عن عمل المنظمة. في التأليف والنشر والترجمة، الصحيح المنظمة تبنت كل الانتلكتشوالز والسكولرز في الوطن العربي اللي لديه فكرة للتأليف أو النشر، وتبنت ودعمت هذا التوجه، وخصصت له حقيقة يعني زي مكافأة نقدية ومادية وأشياء أخرى لكل من يريد أو يحب أو لديه القدرة بالتأليف والنشر. ثم هنالك المجلة العربية للإدارة، وهي من أوائل وأقدم المجلات العربية المحكمة في المجال الأكاديمي، وأيضا تبنت كثير من النشر والتأليف. وبنحكي إحنا هون عن إيش ما يسمى بجينيوين ريسيرش، نشر وتأليف حقيقي، وكان له فائدة وجوانب تطبيقية في مجالات كثيرة من الإدارة العربية. ثم أيضا رعاية بعض الجوائز. المنظمة بترعى حوالي 7 جوائز، منهم 3 جوائز للمملكة العربية السعودية وجائزتين لدولة الإمارات العربية اللي احنا على أرضها، وبدعم من هذه الجهات بالسعودية والإمارات العربية. وهناك إن شاء الله تطلع لدعم يعني جوائز في دول عربية أخرى. وزي ما بتعرفوا الجوائز أصلا هي تقوم على فكرة خلاقة. الجائزة بحد ذاتها هي عبارة عن مكافأة لفكرة إبداعية وخلاقة تتضمن هذه الجائزة. والجوائز الأخرى زي برنامج التميز، الأداء الحكومي في دبي، والأخ زياد معنا اليوم بجوز يعطينا فكرة عنه. هذه الجوائز وهي البرامج قادت دول ومجتمعات نقلتها نقلات حضارية في جانب الإدارة. نفس البرنامج اللي تبناه محدثنا في الصباح مهاتير محمد، هو تبنى البرنامج في معهد التنمية الإدارية الإنتان، منه انطلق أفكاره واحتضنت أفكاره ونقلت البلد نقلات وقفزات كبيرة جدا. فإخواني لا نستهين بقضايا الجوائز، لأنها فعلا برامج إصلاح. تقديم الجديد في مجالات التدريب المعتمدة، والمنظمة تقريبا كل سنة بتقدم حوالي 1200 برنامج تدريبي. 1200 لا أستطيع أن أقول أنهم كلهم عبارة عن برامج فيها أفكار خلاقة ومبدعة وإلى آخره، ولكن في بعض منها حقيقة كل سنة يتم مراجعته، وبنقدم من خلال هذه البرامج الحديث في مجال التطوير المؤسسي والفردي. ثم تقديم بعض المبادرات والمشاريع في مجالات الإدارة الحكومية والعمل العربي المشترك. المنظمة أيضا في السابق وفي الأيام السنوات الماضية تبنت عدد من المشاريع اللي تعتبر مشاريع خلاقة ومبدعة، ورفعتها إلى المجالس الوزارية ثم وصلت إلى مستوى القمة، زي البوابة الحكومية العربية والاتحاد العربي الجمركي وإلى آخره. هنالك يعني أفكار كثير جميلة وضعت. عندما تصل لعند مستوى الساسة الأمر يعود لهم أن يتبنوا هذه الأفكار أو يعدلوها أو يغيروها. ثانيا نقل المعرفة. الأدوار الثلاثة يعني متكاملة، لا نستطيع أن نفصل بينهم، لكن في مجال نقل المعرفة ونقل المعرفة الفرق بينه وبين الأولى أن الأولى بتحكي عن جينيوين وأوريجينال، بس في مجال النقل أنت بتعمل إيميتيشن أو بتنقل تجارب ناجحة أو معرفة لغيرك ليس لك. في مجال نقل المعرفة هنالك اجتماع دوري لمدراء مدارس الإدارة في الوطن العربي. حقيقة هذا يعتبر منتدى كبير جدا. من خلال هذا اللقاء ننقل في الأفكار من المدارس الأخرى، وإحنا عملنا هذا اللقاء بين مدارس عربية والمدارس العالم والمدارس الأوروبية، فهو محفل كبير انتقل من حوار أشخاص إلى حوار مدارس، والحوار هذا ارتقينا فيه أيضا من حوار عربي إلى حوار عربي عالمي في الإدارة، حتى نرفع سقوف التحدي ونرفع سقوف التطوير والتحديث في الإدارة العربية. ثم العلاقة المهنية مع الهيئات الدولية في الإدارة والمؤسسات الدولية، يعني بدون ذكر وشرح طويل، المنظمة العربية ترتبط تقريبا مع عشرات بل مئات من المؤسسات الدولية اللي تعنى بالإدارة، بتبدأ من البنك الدولي لكل المؤسسات اللي معروفة في هذا المجال. ومن خلال هذه العلاقة بصير عملية نقل المعرفة ونقل التجارب من مجتمعات مختلفة إلى المجتمعات العربية. دور المنظمة بس للتوضيح ليس النقل بمعنى النقل الحرفي، يعني مش نقل الكفر، لأن ناقل الكفر ليس بكافر، لا، هي الحقيقة المنظمة بتلعب دور بنقل هذه الأفكار وهذه التجارب، وبنحاول قدر المستطاع أن نلعب دور الانكيوبيتر، الحاضنة، حتى نكيفها لمجتمعاتنا ولثقافات المجتمعات العربية اللي أيضا هي مختلفة وإن يعني تشابهت في أشياء كثيرة. ثم هناك سلسلة تجارب الناجحة أيضا المنظمة، وهذه من الأنشطة الكبيرة جدا اللي بتساعدنا في عملية نقل المعرفة، إنه بننقل تجارب الدول العربية ثم التجارب الدولية، وخاصة التجارب اللي فازت بجوائز عالمية نضعها بتصرف وباطلاع متخذ القرار والمدراء العرب حتى يستفيدوا منها، لأنها حققت نجاحات في مجتمعات أخرى مرة أخرى، أيضا مع التكييف والتطوير بملائم مجتمعاتنا. وأيضا هنالك المنظمة بتقدم مجموعة من الأنشطة اللي هي مؤتمرات وندوات وملتقيات وورش عمل. الصحيح هذه يعني بتختلف شوي عن التدريب متخصص، ولكن هذه مهارات عامة. أيضا هذه المؤتمرات احنا مجموعها بالسنة تقريبا حوالي 90 نشاط، وال90 نشاط أكثر من ثلثيهم بشارك فيهم شركاء بالوطن العربي وهيئات دولية، وأيضا بصير في نقل جميل لكثير من المعارف والمهارات. في اللقاءات المهنية الأخرى اللي هم لقاء مدراء الابتعاث والتدريب، وعندنا المائدة المستديرة مخصصة للوزراء أو من بحكمهم، والمجالس التنفيذية للمنظمة. أيضا المنظمة زي ما بتاخذ بتعطي، يعني أو زي ما بتعطي بتاخذ، حتى إحنا بناخذ توجيه من الهيئات الرقابية والمجالس السيادية اللي هم وزراء الخدمة المدنية أو من بحكمهم في الوطن العربي، وبنفس الوقت أيضا نمرر ذلك لمدراء الابتعاث في الوطن العربي. في مجال نقل المعرفة، القواعد البيانية للمنظمة والأنشطة الاستشارية. القواعد البيانية احنا المنظمة يعني من الإرث الكبير في المنظمة القواعد البيانية، والقواعد البيانية تتضمن تقريبا معظم القواعد الرئيسية للداتابيسز بالإدارة، وكل هذه القواعد البيانية هي متاحة لمتخذي القرار والمؤسسات العربية، لجانب أيضا مشاركة الخبراء الدوليين والعرب في مجال الاستشارات بتقدمها المنظمة، واللي فيها فكر وفيها تطبيق حقيقة يعني في معظم الأحيان مفيد. في ثالثا المحور الأخير اللي هو نشر المعرفة. في عملية النشر اللي هي عملية الأكسس للمعلومة. Alright, I'll do it in 2 minutes. Fine. في مجال نشر المعرفة أحيانا بيكون عندنا يعني معرفة أصيلة، وبيكون عندنا معرفة منقولة ولكنها لا تصل للناس، يعني نفس الشيء كأنه ما عندنا شيء. وبالتالي حتى تكتمل الصورة يجب أن نصل أو نوصل المعلومة للشخص الصح والجهات الصح، وهذا دور كبير حقيقة بتقوم فيه المنظمة من خلال تسويق أنشطة المنظمة المختلفة. احنا بنقوم بتوصيل وتسويق أنشطتنا إلكترونيا وعن طريق وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي وعن طريق البريد العادي والإلكتروني، تقريبا لمئات الآلاف من المؤسسات العربية، وعلى رأسها المؤسسات اللي هم معاهد الإدارة ووزارات الخدمة المدنية أو من بحكمهم، وفي المؤسسات التي يتناسب أو يناسبها موضوع النشاط أو المعلومة. الاشتراك في المعارض الدولية والإقليمية مثل معارض الكتب. المنظمة أيضا الإرث أو المؤلفاتها بتعرضها في المعارض الدولية حتى توفر هذه المعلومة، وأيضا كل أنشطة المنظمة اللي بتزيد بالسنة عن 100 نشاط بتأرشفها على قواعدها البيانية وبتتيحها بأسعار رمزية لكل المستفيدين وكل الجهات العربية. ثم أيضا أخيرا هنالك قمنا بإعداد ما يسمى بالتحالف الاستراتيجي اللي هو بنتوقع يكون إن شاء الله Arabian Consortium زي الأبسكو Arabian أبسكو أو which is a big database اشترك فيها المنظمة العربية مع كل المكتبات في الجامعات العربية ومعاهد الإدارة، وإن شاء الله بنتيحها بأسعار فعلا رمزية لكل متخذي القرار والمستفيدين في الوطن العربي. شكرا لحسن استماعكم، واعذروني على اني تكلمت بسرعه، يعني بجوز في بعض النقاط تستحق شويه توضيح، ولكن كلكم الباب وان اللبيب من الاشاره يفهمه. شكرا لكم.
Thank you very much, Rafat. Our next presenter is Professor Zayed Al-Khaloud. Thank you. Just one more point. Please remember that you could ask questions at the end. We're going to have the panel discussion, so please make sure you have questions to ask. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Since it's already 15 minutes past 2 in the afternoon, after a heavy lunch, may I ask you to stand up, please? You feel better already? You can shake hands with the one sitting next to you, and if you are alone, shake hands with yourselves. You can now happily back to your seats and have a seat, please. I can see that people are enjoying this a lot. It gives me a great pleasure and honor to address such a distinguished audience like yourselves. And it gives me a great pleasure and honor to introduce first the program that I proudly represent. As Professor Fahouri said, I work for the Dubai Government Excellence Program, which is a pioneer program. We believe and we prove that we are the first comprehensive program for government excellence, purely government excellence in the world. The Dubai Government Excellence Program is a unique program where we develop criteria and models for excellence in the government. We search the world for best practices, models, criteria for government excellence, and then we nationalize these models and criteria to make it more suitable for the work environment in Dubai. Secondly, we communicate these programs, models, criteria to the government entities through different channels of communication. Third, we supervise a fair and objective assessment of their performance based on the criteria that we already communicated to them. Fourthly, we supervise their recognition, the recognition of excellence performance by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. And finally, we share knowledge. These experiences and experiments of the distinguished employees, government entities, we share knowledge through, again, different channels of communication with the government. So this continuous loop of activities that the program, Dubai Government Excellence Program, is doing every year is enhancing knowledge sharing and learning in the government of Dubai. Secondly, may I introduce myself? My name is Zayed Al-Khaloud. I have a PhD in quality management in a specific area of the design, the quality of the design of education and training services. I also worked as the Assistant Dean for Productivity and Quality Institute in the Arab Academy for Science and Technology before joining the Executive Council in Dubai 8 years ago. Today, we are going to address a different topic. It's about change management and how can organizational learning empower effective change management. First, I will introduce what I understand as organizational learning. Then, again, I will introduce the change management, and I will discuss what is the link between change management and organizational learning. And I will share some examples of success stories with you. As we all know, change management is an approach to transitioning individuals, teams, and organizations to a desired future state. We all need change management in our organizations and in our career as well as individuals. The problem is, based on the Association for Talent Development, which is a very famous organization in the United States, they issued a report called Change Agent, the Role of Organizational Learning in Change Management, which shows that only 17% of 765 business and learning professionals stated that they rated the organization highly effective in managing change initiatives. In other words, majority of the change management projects failed. Why? The reason the report implying is if leaders and their workforce are to improve their change management capabilities, it will require relevant, innovative, and dynamic learning opportunities that keep pace with the shifting demands of organizational transformations. Actually, from what I learned over 22 years working on quality and excellence knowledge management initiatives, if an organization is successful in transforming or transitioning to a new desired state, the problems occur when they cannot maintain or keep the gains that they have achieved. They might be successful in reaching the stage or the state that they desire, but they fail to keep it. They fail to maintain it because they don't learn. I was inspired by Dr. Ala's opening speech when he said, we need to learn how to learn, because this is what we are missing. We need to make it in our DNA, how to learn. In one of the presentations I addressed your distinguished conference before, I think in the second session of the conference, I stated that there is a need to simply apply learning techniques such as after-action review. After each action, you should sit and learn your lessons. And then keep these lessons so that you don't do the mistakes again or you know how to succeed again. You can see a very simple model for change management. This is the model of change management that is mostly used when organizations apply change. It's a three-phase organization management. In phase one, preparing for change, you define your change management strategy, prepare your change management team, develop the sponsorship model. In phase two, managing the change itself. And in phase three, reinforcing change. What will happen in this stage? Collect, analyze feedback, diagnose gap, manage resistance, implement corrective actions, and celebrate successes. This is the change management model. And what I think is missing is organizational learning so that you can keep the corrective actions, so that you don't reinvent the wheel. Whatever you have achieved, the successes, the failures, learn from that so that you can keep the momentum and learn from your performance. So organizational learning comes in two folds. Number one, to develop and sustain knowledge. And as Professor Faouri was saying, an organization to be called a learning organization has to create knowledge, to develop knowledge. But where to develop knowledge from? As I always say, your number one source would be your own performance. Before running to learn from best practices, before running to learn from others, start by learning from your own performance. And then, of course, the other channels for learning best practices, learning from others, is also legitimate. But first, you have to learn from your own performance. Secondly, and what most of the literature and organization doesn't recognize as importance of for learning organization is to use the knowledge to improve performance. So organization focuses more on how to develop knowledge, so they run to learning from best practices, going into benchmarking, learning from research, and they accumulate knowledge, a lot of wisdom. But without putting this knowledge into action, without using this knowledge, you are missing two objectives. Number one, to achieve better results and better performance based on the learned lessons, based on the learned knowledge that you have. And number two, you are missing again the generation of new knowledge based on this practice. Because when you practice decision making, new designs, new services, new technology based on the knowledge accumulated, you are generating new knowledge again so that the cycle is complete. You make knowledge, utilize knowledge. And the utilization of knowledge is also generating new knowledge, and the circle continues. And to do that, you have to, as I said, to build in your organizational DNA, the operating system, the current strategies, processes, assumptions, everything. The organization DNA should incorporate learning techniques and learning management as part of day-to-day job. The problem happens when you take learning and knowledge management as additional work, as something that you have to do in addition to what you would normally do. This is a problem. Learning should become on your day-to-day. It's normal. It's like breathing. And then, by doing this, you will accumulate and generate organizational knowledge, which is then kept in documentation of policies, procedures, systems, and so on. 4 keys to effectively managing change in learning organization. Number 1, to change the organizational culture, to adopt the ever non-stop learning approach. Learn how to learn, or to continue developing. As His Excellency Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad today morning said, that we are proud in Malaysia to be developed countries. I think we should be proud to be developing countries, because the ing at the end refers to continuous developing. We have to be proud that we are developing, and we will continue developing, because it's a non-stop process. We should continue developing to feel the change and to be able to apply the change. And we hope in that context never to be developed. We would like to continue developing, and this will take us to our objectives and goals. Then quickly and effectively capture improvement ideas. Set up systems that help the organization at all levels to constantly learn, to continuously learning from performance and from best practices. And finally, as I said always, use the learned knowledge. Knowledge is not meant to be kept in drawers or in smart systems or in expert systems or whatever. Use the knowledge. Go back to the lessons learned and utilize them so to improve performance. I'll give you an example, being cautious of time, from a practice. this is a story that has been told to me by David Harron, one of the international thinkers and speakers. He told us for one of the flight times that he went to an airport and tried to self-check-in. I think most of us have tried this before. You go to the machine, punch in your booking code or booking reference number. Thank you. And then you will have your boarding printed. So our friend went to the machine, tried to punch in his code booking reference, tried several times, and he had an error message come to the screen. You can't do this. He started to feel panic. He looked around. You see one of the staff of the airplane, same airlines company, standing. He recognized her from the uniform. He looked at her, she looked at him, and she said, "You are facing troubles in your self-check-in." He said, "Yes." She said, "Do you have an L or O in your booking reference?" He looked at the booking, he said, "Yes, I have an L or O." "How did you know?" He said, "I have been there in the company for 8 years. This happens all the time." Once again, she knows, and the company knows, that having an L or an O in the booking reference will cause problems because people might see it as a 1 or a 0. So she gave him the answer. Try punching in 1 or 0 and it will work for you. So he did, and it worked. He printed the the flight boarding. So what happens? Why did they learn? If they know for 8 years now that having an L or an O in the booking reference will cause problems, why didn't they take actions to improve this? How many of us have similar situations in our companies? We do the same mistakes every time because simply we don't have time to correct them. On the other way, again from the flight management area, I was sitting on one of the planes flying to Heathrow from Cairo. I was sitting on the aisle, but not in the first class as in this picture. I was sitting in the economy class. And as you can see, I am a huge guy. So half of my shoulder was hanging on the aisle. And the steward came with coffee while I was trying to move. So he hit me, and a drop of coffee spilled in my jacket. So I looked at him to say sorry about this because I hit him. And he looked at me, "Sorry, it's my fault, I should be more careful." And he took off the drop of coffee. I can hardly see it. After a while, he came again with his crew, superintendent, whatever. And they whispered at my ear, "My colleague told me about the incident. We are very sorry." I said, it's my fault. I am very sorry. End of story. He said, no. We have to report this. Do you mind to sign off that you are happy and you don't have any complaint? I said, okay, fine, I'm happy, I don't have any complaint. So he brings this form, 4 parts. Part number 1, incident report, flight number, seat number, passenger name, regular info. Part number 2, description of the incident. So a drop of coffee in the jacket, gentleman, so and so. Part number 3, corrective actions. And then, to my surprise, he wrote a complimentary dry clean for the whole suit in any dry clean in London. I told him, can I bring the rest of my clothes so that you can put a drop for each suit? And then I asked him, I am a quality expert, why you are doing this? He said, because we have to report this, because these reports will go to the headquarters and they will study such incidents. And based on such incidents, they might redesign the whole cabin to give more room for the flight attendants to serve the passengers. And we have other things that we can learn from such incidents reports. So please don't stop from learning from others. I have another example of best practices. Al Jazeera International Catering won the International Best Practice Competition organized by Abu Dhabi Chamber of Commerce in cooperation with Center of Organizational Excellence and Research. What they have done, they have created a tool for knowledge sharing and transferring. They call SPEARS. Set objectives, provide resources, empower your people, appraise them, recognize distinguished performance, and then share knowledge. This is what they call best practice sharing system. Thank you for your patience and wish you luck for the rest of the day.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Zayed. The next presenter is Sedwin Fernandez. We are going to continue with the theme of learning organization. So please welcome Sedwin. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you all for coming. My talk is based on an empirical study which is done with the Emirates Center for Organizational Learning and with Dr. Ala Garad, who has also been a colleague of mine and is a professor in organizational learning. The main goal of Emirates Center of Organizational Learning is to promote learning in organizations, and this paper is geared towards that particular aim. This is a pilot study. As you may see in the desk in front of you, there is a questionnaire. Thank you for those who have completed it. It's part of an ongoing study. So this is part of the current research we are doing. So if you just identify the questionnaire in just a minute, if it's next to you, it will make it easier for you to follow what's happening. So these were our research questions for this study. To what extent are organizations in the UAE learning organizations? And what is the impact of learning organizations on job satisfaction and job performance? The reason why it is important to measure learning in organizations, it will help us identify the gaps, estimate what is the current state, identify gaps, identify good and best practices, and develop an action plan to embed organization learning in UAE organizations. There is a large numbers of surveys or instruments which are developed to measure learning in organizations. We have chosen the Learning Organization Questionnaire, the DLOQ, by Watkins and Marsick. The reason we have chosen this, just to put it very briefly here, is that this is a validated instrument and has been widely used across many countries, across industries, and across sectors. The definition of learning organization we take again from Watkins and Marsick and define learning organization as an organization characterized by continuous learning for continuous improvement and that has the capacity to transform itself. And this would imply a group of people who scan and interpret their dynamic environment and create new knowledge, which they need to produce new and innovative products and services designed to meet customer needs. These are the various dimensions of the DLOQ questionnaire. So continuous and learning, create continuous learning opportunities. So if you look at the questionnaire, some of the areas are, in my organizations, people discuss mistakes in order to learn from them. In my organizations, people help each other. In my organizations, people can get money and other resources to support their learning. Inquiry and dialogue, just a sample. In my organization, people are encouraged to ask why, regardless of rank, so status is not an issue. Collaboration and team learning. In my organization, teams and groups focus on both groups' tasks and how well the group is doing. Teams and groups are rewarded for their achievements as groups. Establish systems to capture and share learning. My organization enables people to get needed information anytime quickly and has an up-to-date database of employee skills, so in that line. Empower people towards collective action. Again, some examples are, my organization invites people to contribute to the organization's vision. It supports employees who take calculated risks. For the connect and organizations to its environment, my organization considers the impact of decisions on employees' morale. My organization helps employees balance work and family, works together with outside community to meet mutual needs. And the last dimension, leaders model and support learning. So in my organization, the leaders mentor and coach those who they lead and constantly encourage people to learn. These 7 dimensions can be put together as global, organization, teams, and individual learning. So using this instrument, we have developed our study. So the DLOQ instrument, the full instrument with 43 items, and the outcomes which we want to see what is the impact of learning organizations on job satisfaction and job performance. The sample, as we said, is a pilot study. It's across all industries and all areas. It's a pilot study just to test whether the instrument is, some changes need to be done for this particular environment. Our sample for this type of study is reasonably small, and that's why it's a pilot study, and it's an ongoing study. These are our demographics of our sample, which generally represent the demographics of the workers or employees in the UAE. It has a good mix of private and public sector and across nationalities, education, and job profiles. Here are some of the results of our sample which we had surveyed, and we see that the UAE performs generally above average in most of the dimensions of the survey. So it's encouraging to note that organizations in the UAE support learning in organizations. The lowest on the score is that of continuous learning, and this relates to openly discuss mistakes, identify skills required for future needs, and give time and support to individuals to learn. This could be due to the nature of our sample. Our sample has many more expatriates as compared to UAE nationals, and one of the reasons why this could be on a lower end of the score, though it is above average, could be that organizations do not invest in in expatriates because they're not sure whether they are here for the long term. So that's something that needs to be investigated at a later stage. If we group all the dimensions together, on the organization level is the lowest score. And again, we require to encourage systems to capture and share learning and to empower people more. Again, we need to look at whether this is a bias coming from the sample where people are not empowered to take action, because as an expatriate, you may think that the person is here for a very short period of time and may not stay longer with the organization or may switch organizations quickly. Some international comparisons, so I'll just let you have a look at this slide. We have Lebanon, Sri Lanka, Korea, Iran, and China. The Lebanon scores are high. I think one of the reasons is that is from the IT sector. So one has to see whether the sector has does something in that sector that is contributing to the high level of organization. The Sri Lankan one is of the Sri Lankan Army, and whether the Sri Lankan Army is a learning organization. Korea is across a big Korean company, one company, but with different areas of business. Iran is across sectors, and China also is across sectors. So it is very heartening to note that UAE, being a young country, is already on its way to encouraging learning in organizations. When we look at what is the impact of being a learning organization on job satisfaction and job performance, we find that there is a strong correlation with job satisfaction of 0.74, a significant correlation with job performance, but not a very high correlation. And we'll see what is the impact on job satisfaction, as we can see here in this regression equation. So being a learning organization contributes to the job satisfaction of the employee, and a satisfied employee has a lot of positive impact on the customer service, the financial outcomes for the company. Similarly, for the job performance, being a learning organization has a positive and significant impact on the organization. So just being a learning organization for itself, this shows that learning organizations has a lot of positive impact on the organization. In conclusion, the UAE has scores higher than most dimensions. The focus on continuous learning can be improved. As I said before, this is only a pilot study, so I would just consider this as initial results. One of the things which we are going to do now is to broad-base the study across organizations, from the government sector, from the NGOs, and also the private sector, and see what are the results, whether they map out what we have done at present. We also look at individual large companies where to estimate whether the organization is a learning organization in one company has more merit than doing it across sectors. Once this is done, the main task of this study is to identify the gaps and suggest what are the changes or what is the training or what is the learning that is required to encourage the organizations to become learning organizations. Thank you very much.
I think Dr. Alaba would like to add to the conclusion of this paper. You've got 1 minute.
I need to, Assalamu alaikum جميعا. I need to clarify not the conclusion for the day, just little piece of talk for this paper, because I think this is the first paper to measure the level, if we can say, the level of organizational learning. So Dr. Sidwin and myself have worked on this, and I attribute most of the work that has been done by him, especially with the analysis. This is the first exploratory study. We look for your help in your organizations. We may send you a survey. كنا نقلب شوية عربي. I'll try to speak a little bit in Arabic also. إنه ممكن نبعت لحضراتكم الاستبيان. دي أول دراسة إحنا نعملها لقياس التعلم. زي ما ديمينج قال، ما لا يمكن قياسه لا يمكن تحسينه أو تطويره. وبعرف طبعا إنه موضوع قياس التعلم موضوع صعب. يعني التعلم زي النور. بتشوف النور في كل مكان، لكن صعب ان انت تقيسه او تمسكه يعني. فاحنا بنحاول نقيس حاجة very subjective. حتى الاستبيان نفسه based on perceptions. يعني احنا ما عندناش measure مسطرة نمسكها ونقيس بالضبط كمية التعلم او مساحة التعلم قد ايه. We are trying to quantify something subjective. لكن هي محاولة، يعني it's a trial ان احنا نبدأ في عملية قياس أثر التعلم. We try to spread the word. We need your help in doing this. If you are interested to do some research with us, our contact information is there. You are most welcome. احنا عايزين نركز على المنطقة العربية، لأنه أعتقد احنا أحوج ما نكون إلى موضوع التعلم وتطبيق ما نتعلمه. لدينا عقول كثيرة ولدينا كفاءات، ولن أزايد ولا أتكلم بعد كلمة دكتور رفعت الفاوري ودكتور زياد الكحلوت، ولكن محتاجين أن احنا نحط هذا التعلم موضع التطبيق وموضع التنفيذ. فمحتاجين تعاونكم. والحاجة أخيرة بالنسبة للعروض التقديمية، البرزنتيشنز هتكون إن شاء الله موجودة على الويب سايت بتاع المؤتمر olcmena.com. We will publish all the slides on the website, and also tomorrow we will announce the next conference. Next year, we will announce the date and the country also. Thank you.
Our final presenter is Alistair Wiley, and he will take the discussion towards social learning and action learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alistair Wiley. I'm a principal consultant with Taylor Clark, which is a leadership and organizational development consultancy based in Glasgow in Scotland. I'm also a student on the Ashridge Doctoral Change Programme, conducting heuristic and participative research into collaborative working. I'd like to present to you a case study on the application of John Heron's 4 ways of knowing in building organizational learning and development capacity to support public service transformation in Scotland. So this was an action research inquiry that I designed and facilitated in Scotland earlier this year. In 2010, the Scottish Government commissioned an inquiry chaired by the late Dr. Campbell Christie into the delivery of public services in Scotland and the urgent requirement for their improvement. The report of the Christie Commission on the future delivery of public services concluded that in the face of unprecedented decreasing financial resources and increasing demand for public services, there is an urgent and sustained reform needed in 4 key objective areas. So first of all, services built around people and communities rather than services built around those who deliver services to people and communities. Secondly, working together to deliver outcomes rather than working in sectoral silos to deliver outcomes. prioritizing prevention, reducing inequalities, promoting equality, improving performance, and reducing cost, I think, are self-evident. But those were the 4 key priority areas for reform. Christie's findings were that public services in Scotland had become fragmented. So you went to one organisation for one service and an entirely different organisation for another. They were in no way joined up. They were top-down. They were conceived from people delivering the service rather than those involved who were going to receive the service. They were complex, not easy to find out about, and opaque, not transparent. His conclusions were that coordination, integration, drivers and incentives were required to promote collaboration among public authorities who deliver services, and a need for an asset-based approach, an appreciative approach to shared and personalized services that are designed to build autonomy and resilience in service users. So this is with the idea that the public sector can no longer expect to provide services for everyone in every situation to their satisfaction, and above all delivered with and for people and communities and not to them. It was within this context that a public sector collaborative learning programme has been set up by the Scottish Government in response to the Christie findings, to build organisational learning and development community across, to build organisational learning and development knowledge and skills across the community within the public services, and to develop transformational leadership capacity to deliver public service reform. So these are the 2 aims of this collaborative learning programme that's been set up. So this program then commissioned a 2-day residential workshop for 60 organizational learning and development practitioners across a range of public sector organizations in Scotland. So I should now say that most public sector organizations in Scotland have got a lead OD officer or a lead organizational learning and development officer somewhere within the organization. Some are housed within training and development within HR and have a very different remit and expectation from their organization from others who are housed within the Chief Executive's department and who on the organogram float in a spur above the directors of the functional areas within the organization. Yet again, others are trying to traverse the whole of the organization as internal consultants, as spare pairs of hands, working for functional directors and managers across the organization. But most public sector organizations in Scotland have now got a named organizational learning and development practitioner. So we were asked to design and run a workshop to explore and present individual experiences of organizational learning and development because people's understanding of this role was diverse. To hear other voices from the field, who else needs to give evidence, needs to contribute their perspective to the scope of OD. To provide direction for the shared development that this program is going to take forward, and specifically to scope the collaborative working that might be taken forward with regard to the reform agenda. So the outcome of this 2-day capacity building exercise was to better inform this program of the areas for its future attention and investment. So the methodology I chose for this design was firstly heuristic inquiry, whereby the participants at the workshop were the subject of their research into themselves. I wanted to provide each of them with an opportunity to reflect on their experience of their role, their identity, their context, the mindset that they had, and their practice as organizational learning and development practitioners across public sector organizations. And through a reflexive process of increasing their awareness and knowledge and understanding of how they fulfill their role, I intended, or I hoped, that they would become more aware of their individual strengths and areas for development in contributing to the transformation agenda. And secondly, participative inquiry, so that relevant phenomena might emerge and present themselves in real time as an outcome of each participant's participation in the workshop and the sharing of their experience and their knowledge. Of course, you cannot conduct heuristic and participative research from anywhere other than an internal locus of awareness. And so I was keen to enable people to connect with their experience now, because it's only now that they have a perspective on what happened in the past, and it is only now that they can envisage their future. And as that future happens, it does so in the continuous present as an ongoing perspective on now. To begin with, I considered using David Cooperrider and Srivasta's appreciative inquiry, which I am familiar with. I have used many times for such inquiry workshops. So discover, dream, design, destiny, or deploy, very familiar to me, used for many years as a strengths-based approach to capacity building. However, I decided that the Heron process might yield some noticeable differences. Specifically, I felt that participants were better able to talk about their strengths and their triumphs and their challenges, that discover process, after a process of reflection and a felt sense of the experience. And I think that this difference is important. My experience of appreciative inquiry is often that people move into dialogue without sufficient grounding in their own experience. The process often doesn't allow them to connect with and sense how they feel before they're expected to share what they think. And instead, that process of sharing often finds a much more comfortable level of acceptance and safety in contributing a similar experience. Yes, that happened to me too. So sharing different experiences, or sharing how strongly those differences have been experienced, I felt was better able to move people towards a more robust propositional knowing. So the initial process of connecting to recent past experiences began with reflection on appreciative questions. And I deliberately chose the emotive word proud to signify that people's achievement is good and that they care about it. So when you think of what you have achieved over recent months, what are you most proud of and why? What feedback from others or evidence from the system supports or challenges your view? And after thinking, I then wanted them to feel. I wanted them to experience a feeling of what remains difficult or challenging, and also what it feels like to make a small step towards resolution. So I asked people to work in pairs, with one person having an organizational difficulty or challenge, and their partner representing that difficulty. And the partner didn't need to know anything about who he or she is representing, but the person with the difficulty needed to be really clear who their partner is and what the difficulty is between them. So I then asked the person with the difficulty to position themselves in relation to their partner in such a way as to represent that difficulty. Looking at both of you now, I said, anyone will be able to see the challenge between you without knowing what that is. And when you're in that position, take a moment to be aware of what it feels like, what is happening in your body. And your partner, you don't know who you are or what you represent, but how do you feel in this position of difficulty? What's going on for you in your body? And now I want you both to say something, just a short phrase. Make one small move, each of you, that will instinctively help this relationship. And then again, notice how you feel. What is happening to you in your body? And finally, if it feels appropriate to you, move again in a way that begins to address this difficulty. So here you see 2 photographs taken by somebody else who was watching this process, where I think you can see some of the attitudes of how the difficulties were presenting for people and how their position changed in order to be better able to address those difficulties as a result of this somatic knowing. I then used a fishbowl dialogue to include voices from the field, so contributions from stakeholders in the public sector system, the policy maker's tale, the partnership manager's tale, the delivery partner's tale, the service user's tale. Each of those representatives of stakeholder groups had evidence to give, a contribution to make to public sector reform agenda. Each stakeholder said something from their perspective and their viewpoint before their introductory statements were then widened into a free-flowing dialogue. And 2 chairs were left empty, unoccupied, for people to join the dialogue, ask a question or make a point, and remain until their question or point had been addressed, and then vacate their seat for other people to join in. And then I felt after that, people were more able, from a place of having connected with their own experience and having heard about the experiences of others, to then talk about, this is what I think we should do with regard to public service transformation. I also wanted participants to present their propositional knowing. So over the years, I've run many participative processes in which there's an opportunity to consider what better might look like and how we might envisage the future or what better might look like. So sometimes I ask people to imagine a desired end state and draw it as a rich picture, or design the headline and the front page of their corporate newsletter, or role play a scenario that demonstrates new behaviors, that sort of thing. But over the years, envisaging the future, I don't think is enough. I think it's also necessary to curate, to take care of the stories and the values, the assumptions, the beliefs, the hopes, the expectations, and the emotions that people have invested in their future. Just envisaging what it looks like often doesn't connect. So 5 strong themes emerged out of our propositional knowing discussion on what I think we should do. And at tables for each of those 5 themes, I asked participants to think of their experiences and the experiences that they'd heard from other people and create an artifact, a thing, make something to depict your public service when it is transformed. And then present your artifact and its story to the rest of your table. And then, once everybody had presented at their table, the table was asked to curate all of the exhibits, its salon, for other visitors. And the process of curation is one of deciding what you're going to include or exclude, what you're going to fully explain, or what you're going to let people discover for themselves. So once they had got their curation in place, every table visited each other's tables. And then back at their own table, everybody was asked to curate the whole exhibition as a demonstration of collaborative learning in the service of public sector reform, so that people were able to articulate what has been invested in the future. So here, just some photographs. Here you see a table busy at work making things with very simple materials, children's materials, available from any stationers. Here you see one of the exhibits in the health and social care table. Who can make it happen? A caption written above a tinfoil mirror. Hope made out of pipe cleaners and feathers. The integration chain of health and social care integration, where every visitor to the exhibit was invited to add another link. Here's a table that 8 people made to depict their view of the external culture of transformed services. And finally, the fourth way of knowing, practical knowing, an exploration of what organizational learning and development practitioners know how to do. So again, I think this needed to be located in their own experience of themselves in their role. So I ran this process as a series of parallel action learning sets in order to model effective working through peer support and challenge of practical knowing. So working in parallel sets, participants were asked to consider what it is they can actually do. What is it that they have the power to do, the authorized remit to do in their organizations? What is it that they have been given as resources to do this job in terms of their capacity and their capability, their know-how? And finally, what is in place in terms of structures, systems, and processes to be able to plan for transformation? What is it they're currently doing now? How do they know it's effective? What support do they still need from their own organizations, from this emerging community of practice, or from the government's public sector collaborative learning program? And finally, what actions do they actually intend to take in support of public service transformation? Thank you.
Okay, everybody. I try to summarize it, considering that I didn't hear some of the initial presentation. I think the whole session was about learning organization, of course, and action learning in the last presentation probably dealt with how of the learning organization. We also had comments on organizational development and organizational change. And the interesting thing, which I thought was about different research methods which were used in different presentations which were given here. One was probably a more quantitative survey method, and the other one more heuristic, interpretive, concentrating on the subjective aspect and on the objective aspects. So whether learning can be measured or not, whether learning organization can have measurable criteria to be recognized as that. So probably that's what my basic summary is. So I don't want to talk more than that. But what I like to do is open it to the floor. So please, if you have questions, yes, please. And please mention who you are asking the question. Address it, please. Yeah.
Thank you. My question is for Dr. Rifat. I am Sid Ahmed Ben Rawan, Professor of Management at Carson School of Management, University of Minnesota, and I work on innovation. First, thank you for presenting a very good presentation of the state of the Arab world and the education system, and also the state of the learning organization. It has some very sobering effect, and I was a little bit disappointed to hear all these negative things about the state again of creativity and the state of the education. But again, thank you for being honest in sharing with us these information. My question is the following. What can your organization do to help a program such as the Dubai Business Program, the Dubai Excellence Program, which is again a wonderful experience to be shared with other Arab countries or with other parts of the Arab world? And thank you.
شكرا دكتور أحمد. يعني الصورة هي هيك، بس حتى نكون منصفين هنالك صورة، يعني هنالك وجه آخر للعملة. في طبعا بالعالم العربي في نجاحات جميلة وفي وجوه مضيئة، لا ننكر ذلك، بس البرزنتيشن كانت مركزة على الجانب السلبي. انت ذكرت انه شو اللي ممكن تعمله المنظمة في هذا التوجه، وذكرت برنامج دبي. الصحيح يعني جائزة، هو البرنامج كان قبل ذلك اسمه جائزة سمو الشيخ محمد بن راشد آل مكتوم لتميز الأداء الحكومي، كان قد بدأ من المنظمة العربية للتنمية الإدارية صحيح البرنامج هذا، بعدين انتقل لحكومة دبي وطوروه طبعا لبرنامج، وهو بكل أمانة برنامج يحتذى فيه على مستوى العالم. بنفس الوقت أيضا المنظمة بتعد ورش بين فترة وفترة وسيمينارز لتقديم نماذج من نفس هذا النموذج من خلال التجارب الناجحة، سواء كانت لبرامج أداء أو لتجارب أخرى. يعني احنا عم نساعد الدول، خاصة الدول العربية الأقل نموا بنسميها، احنا بنقدم لهم كل هاي الخدمات وبنقدمها مجانا طبعا. إلى جانب ذلك بنقدم لهم أيضا برامج في التميز ونماذج بجوائز التميز، مش بس من الوطن العربي، من العالم العربي. ولكن دكتور أحمد كما تعلم يعني التعليم عملية طويلة وبطيئة، وبعدين ما بصيرش بالإكراه. شكرا.
Thank you very much. Do you want to come back, or was that okay?
No, that's very good. Thank you so much. Thank you for the answer.
Yes, please. Could you please say who you are?
Okay. I'm Ghada Mohammed Amer, Vice President of Arab Science and Technology Foundation. سؤالي للدكتور رفعت. طبعا أنا يعني بشكره على الأحداث اللي بتعملها المنظمة العربية للتنمية الإدارية، وأنا شخصياً لمست كتير برامج عندكم متقدمة وبتأثر في المنطقة. بس هسأل حضرتك سؤال، والسؤال ده لي أنا شخصياً، يعني مش ليك لوحدك. السؤال يعني حضرتك تفضلت وقلت إن السيد مهدير محمد أو دكتور مهدير محمد بالمنظمة اللي عنده عن طريق التعليم والتعليم المستمر قدر يغير الشكل الإداري في ماليزيا، وخدها من أقصى اليمين لأقصى اليسار ونجح بيها. احنا عندنا منظمة عربية شغالة بقالها 52 سنة في المنطقة العربية. انت شايف التغيير اللي تم ايه من الناحية الإدارية لمنظماتنا العربية؟ ده السؤال الأولاني. السؤال الثاني بس، أو الوجهة نظر الثانية، دلوقتي بعد التغيير اللي عمال بيحصل في المنطقة العربية وانت شايف الأرض بقت أرض خصبة والشباب عندهم استعداد، هل في برامج بأسلوب جديد تجمع الشباب دي كلها وتخليهم يتجهوا الى الاداره الصحيحه واسلوب التعلم الصحيح؟ يعني ده طلب مننا، وده بسالك يعني انتوا فعلا في برامج جديده باسلوب شبابي او باسلوب المطلوب حسب التكنولوجيا الحديثه؟ شكرا.
اوكي. سؤال صعب كتير. يعني احنا علينا مسؤولية أنا لا أنكرها، وجزء من هذه المسؤولية بنقدمها ضمن معايير وضمن قوانين وأنظمة تحد من عمل المنظمات. أنا أتمنى أن تعفيني من الإجابة على هذه الناحية. وعندما أشكو همي لكثير من الناس يقولون لي أن الناس يرمون الحجارة على الأشجار المثمرة، فأقول لهم ويحكم، وهل من أمة على الأرض إلا نحن ترمي الحجارة على الأشجار المثمرة. هذا جزء من أنا كنت أتمنى أن يكون المنظمة تتحرك في أفق أوسع وأشمل. إحنا قدمنا نموذج جميل وطيب أنا أعتقد، ولكن هل بإمكاننا أن نقدم أفضل من ذلك؟ نعم، بإمكاننا أن نقدم أفضل من ذلك بكثير بكثير. بنفس الوقت أيضا يعني أنا ضد ما يسمى بالفاد أند فاشن مانجمنت. اليوم بنحكي عن خصخصة وبكرة عن شباب وبعد شوية عن تمكين المرأة لا، المنظمة ما بتشتغل بقضية الفاد أند فاشن، رغم أنه إحنا بنستجيب لتوجيهات المجلس ونستجيب لتوجهات المؤسسات العربية، ولكن الصحيح أنا أؤكد لك أنه قضية الشباب لم تغيب عن ذاكرة المنظمة يوما ما. لكن بس أنا أوضح نقطة أخرى. هلا لما نقول المنظمة العربية للتنمية الإدارية لا يعني أنه هي المعنية بتطوير الإدارة في الوطن العربي، هي تعمل كبيت خبرة، وبيت الخبرة بيعمل بفولنتري أبروتش، ما في شيء بالإكراه. وأعتقد وإن شاء الله أني أكون صادق فيما أقول أنه ما في جهة عربية طلبت أي شيء في النوها وفي الإدارة العربية وضمن إمكانات المنظمة وقدراتها بخلت فيها. لكن أنا لا أتمنى أنه إحنا نتحمل أو نتصدى لكل التنمية في الوطن العربي، لأنه هذا أمر أكبر بكثير من إمكانات المنظمة البشرية والمادية. وشكرا.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Mastura from Intellectual Excellence Center, Malaysia. I'm very interested with Dr. Ziad's paper, and I would like to share what we have done in Malaysia for the last 2 decades, and also to ask questions to Dr. Ziad. Carl Eric Swaby, a knowledge management guru, talk about translating tacit knowledge to explicit knowledge through personal knowledge, structural knowledge and organizational knowledge. Based from this knowledge, Malaysia has introduced Quality Control Circle Convention back in 1990s under Dr. Mahathir, and it has become a culture where every organizations, every department in the government as well as the private sectors collaborate and compete to learn from each other through this convention. People become connected, people learning from each other, and it is a continuous learning. If we benchmark Apple, now they become the most admired enterprise for the last 7 years because of human resource. And in my opinion, it is about engagement and involvement. It is no more about empowerment. And this is where we have done in Malaysia. So my question is, would there be any interest for the government to get the people on the floor to be involved in quality circles initiatives across the Middle East? Because we need to leverage from the mobility of workforce in the Middle East to learn from one another. And we are talking about from bottom up, it's no more from top bottom. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This one is not working. Yeah, finally it's working. Thank you very much for your comment and the question. Yes, we are very open to collaboration and sharing knowledge with the rest of the world. And we would be very much interested in sharing our best practices in running the program. How do we run the excellence program? How do we run the award? How we communicate the criteria, and also to coordinate sharing best practices with the government entities who have actually achieved a lot in this area. They became benchmark. In Dubai government now, we will find entities that achieved tremendous results in different areas. They are willing to share their knowledge and best practices with Far East, Middle East, and the rest of the world. I'd also like to comment on the previous question from our colleague about the cooperation between us, the program, and the Arab Organization for Administrative Development. I've been invited by the organization on a couple of occasions to share our best practices in Dubai Government Excellence Program and success stories of the government entities. So they are trying to spread the best practices from the government practices in the Dubai Government Excellence Program. And I may just correct something that may be misunderstanding, that the Dubai Government Excellence Program has been there now for 18 years based on a decree by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed. Maybe His Excellency Professor Fauri mentioned Mohammed bin Rashid Award for best practices in administration. We have another award that we work jointly with the organization for that, the Arab Award for best practices in administration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions, please? Yes, please. Again, could you say who you want to address it to?
It's actually for Dr. Zaid and again, Dr. Rifat. It's just a comment. I did a lot of work with certain Arab countries in the North Africa, specifically working on e-government and online government. That's about 4 years ago under the World Bank recommendation. And again, my experience has been relatively negative as a result, because again, resistance to change and introducing new concepts has not been very, very welcomed in some parts of the country and in some part of the administration. So my hope and my comment is that organizations such as yours, with the success of the Dubai Excellence Program, could probably be pioneering vehicles, change agents, as we say in the field, to be able to again introduce this type of programs. And thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes, please. Yeah.
I have a question for Alistair.
Do you have your microphone, please?
I think I do, yes. Is it
Okay.
on? Yeah. Alistair, you talked about organisations appointing organisational learning roles, and then you went on to describe really well how you'd intervened in an organisation to deal with or to work with the people who actually did the jobs. And my question is, when you transfer the responsibility for organisational learning to an individual in a role, does that actually get in the way?
Yay, there we go. Does it get in the way? I don't know. I think that if you have someone who has a role and therefore a responsibility and therefore an accountability within that role, then there is an expectation that issues will be surfaced and engaged with and addressed and improved. But I think it very much depends on what a previous speaker has said about the quality of engagement. Because unless there is a meaningful engagement on behalf of everyone in the organization, then it remains somebody else's responsibility. And perhaps compliance, albeit willing compliance, and willing compliance I think will get the job done, but it is not the same as commitment. And it's difficult to be committed, I think, if you're not clear as to committed to what. So there has to be some form of exploration of the purpose, the picture, the plan, the part that you're going to play in how the organizational development agenda connects with you and how it is taken forward, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes, please. Yeah.
I think my question is about one of the challenges we are meeting right now in the Middle East, which is usually organizational learning and development is the rule of HR. And mostly people are thinking that they are responsible of any kind of OL&D. So my question to Mr. Willie is how we can encourage every and each department and division and sector to take this responsibility to be part of his daily work. And I believe we have similar conversation between me and you and Mr. John about the same. How we can make this as a culture that everybody on the organization can talk about it and can take it as a daily habit in his life. Thank you.
Again, it seems to me to be at its best when it is organic. So self-organized conversation, thank you, self-organized conversation seems to me to be a very good way to surface what happens and keeps happening here that is tacitly known. You know, so much is implicit, is tacitly known, and there is a task, certainly perhaps for HR, if that's where organizational learning and development is located, to enable what is tacitly known to be surfaced and for its significance to be felt in some way. Because if it's not significant, if it's not important or urgent, it will be put on the back burner and a great deal of effort will go into the workaround rather than actually deal with what everybody is aware of to some extent, is part of an ongoing daily life in this organization. So facilitating conversation across all functions and at all levels, and preferably between different levels, because otherwise it's difficult for leaders of organizations to be corporately accountable for factors over which they have got no direct control and no real ability to make a hands-on difference. So engaging and connecting with the commitment, the understanding, and the contribution of people across the organization seems to me to be very significant indeed.
Okay, I'm afraid we have to close this session. So can I ask you all to show your appreciation for everybody and for all the presenters, please?
Dr.
Thank you very much.
May I just a little announcement? Tomorrow, inshallah, we will start at 8:30, not 9 o'clock. We'll start at 8:30. Thank you very much and see you tomorrow.